All right. Whilst people are coming on, all right. Just wait, see if this is live actually. Right. All right. I believe we are live, people. Whoa. I believe we are live. All right. إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا وخوشامديد خوانين Layth bienvenidos بخير رغلة an people swagatam ahlan wa sahlan. All right, so whoa, how come it's showing me everybody who's online on top of the screen as well today? Zuckerberg, what are you up to? All right, the hammer is in the house, people. The hammer is in the house. All right, wa alaikum assalam. George, John, likewise, tasharrafna. Right, so, whilst you guys are logging in, what I'm going to do is share this, as always. Let's see, spread the fitan and fasad. You see, somebody has to, right, let me just see. Right. Okay, that's being shared. Naam. Yes, no, yes, no. I take it that's been done. Naam. All right. How are you all doing? All right. Can't change the video quality. I don't know. I'm going to have to change the iPad, inshallah. I mean, this is an iPad Pro. I don't know what's wrong with it or what's right with it. God knows. God knows. But I am looking to get certain changes, modifications made. An qareeb, people. An qareeb. Soon come. Time come. Alright, so what's been going down? What are we looking at? What's all the fitan and fasad saying, people? Those of you, somebody saying the video quality is poor. Is it poor? It could be because it's from a... Right, so is this, I'm not sure if this is poor quality because I don't know, normally I connect it to the upstairs kind of wireless thing, whatever it is, and it was playing up today, so I had it connected to the downstairs. I don't know. Is it alright? Can you guys see it? Is it, how many fingers, people? How many fingers? What do you see? It's not for me. It's not. Well, I don't know. It's just my head. Oh, well, cool. All right, people. So what are we looking at? I can try and reset this whilst we're at it. Maybe it might do something, God knows. But nevertheless, those of you just tuning in, if you click like, click share, people, it's blurry, it's fine. I don't know. Look at this mutashabihat. I'm getting kind of like mixed responses. You know, it's all right. Sid G is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan. All right. So, you know, last week I had some lady, I was reading through the comments afterwards. You know, you read through the comments, and so some lady had said She'd said I'd tuned in. I can't tell what this topic is about. She said, I can't tell what this topic is about. And next time, sort out your technical issues before you go live. I felt like okay, Mom. That was like a bollocking right there. That reminds me of that's how my trust issues began. When my mom said, "Don't worry, come here. I'm not gonna beat you," which was followed by an epic beating of biblical proportions. Anyway, so right now, trajectory. Is the trajectory hermeneutics theory you propose held by any of the scholars, Mufti? How did you come to this conclusion? Billy's in the house asking about Love Island and to watch that. Billy, is that you trying to go on one of these? Is that on one of these shows? Right, so okay, let's take a look at some of these questions. So we're looking at trajectory hermeneutics, that the rulings of the Sharia change. They change people with time. They reflect the ethics of the age. That is my reading into the Sharia. That's how it reflects to me. But I'm not the only person to think like that. Many people before me thought like that. Hence you have the understanding of maqasid in Sharia, which is the Maliki madhab, really repping maqasid, which is the objectives of the Sharia, and how the ahkam, the rulings, change with the day and age. Hence people like Abul Qasim al-Burzali and other people saying that even to the extent in the 8th century Hijri, so about 600-700 years ago, they argued for a change in capital punishments. In fact, in the entire penal code, saying that they not just arguing, they actually changed it. Way to go. So they changed it to monetary kind of penalties in their day and age. So people had to pay they had to pay fines for doing certain things. I suppose, so fines for stealing, fines for, in their day and age this was, fines for adultery, fines for, people would be okay with that though. People would be like, yeah, okay, so this month's salary, part of this is going towards this fine. They'll be like, can I have an ongoing direct debit scheme where I'm always just, look at that. I had to get, just felt like that cup of tea as well. Simultaneously, people confuse the taste buds. Alaykum as-salam. Was Burzali, Imam Burzali, hated for that? He wasn't actually. I mean, some people refuted him. They considered him to be trying to destroy the Sharia, as happens with anybody. Other people supported him. Many Malikiyah supported him, and some kind of supported him, maybe not the full way, but in a huge amount of the... So they agreed in changing the rules, but some of them felt that maybe the original should kind of be suspended in theory and these substitutions should be in practice, whereas he argued for a complete, like the whole thing had changed in his day and age. And some people were in line with him. And because really, if you look at this Sharia, look, Allah mentions in the Quran that about all the prophets, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. Each and every prophet had his own Sharia. So one Sharia, one set of ethics was never God's goal. These are human things. So Allah just left it to the people, and the laws reflected the people they came to. Is claiming Ijtihad impossible? Hell no. I'll do it right here. I'll claim Ijtihad. You see, the irony of ijtihad is that to claim ijtihad, right, the person who's got to approve you or disprove you has to also be a person of ijtihad. So if I claim ijtihad, how can anybody disprove me unless they too indirectly are claiming to be of people of ijtihad? So that's like a catch-22 situation, because I could just say, well, you know, because you guys are not obviously mujtahideen, because you guys are not capable of ijtihad, you just can't understand me. And if you do claim to understand me, then you claim not to be a blind follower, and you claim to be capable of ijtihad. So this one, not nice. This one, catch-22. to catch-22. So this is where things get a bit, all this ijtihad and the rules of ijtihad and all of this, in all honesty, it's nonsense. Yes, it's true that you need to know about the Sharia to kind of speak about it. That is true. That's unquestionable, and that's common sense. But the early scholars used these terms synonymously, interchangeably. Things like faqih, mujtahid, you know, al-alim, all these kind of words, they used them interchangeably. The early usuliyin, al-Juwayni, and people before him, and even maybe slightly after him. And then those who come after start to crystallize all these rules that, okay, to be this, you've got to, the list starts from there. and the last of all the requirements is the sun has to shine from. So it's like, well, okay, mate, if you say so. So anyway, that's on God's ayah could be much. And the early usuliyin spoke of, like people like Ghazali and these people, they spoke of tajazza'ul ijtihad. So ijtihad doesn't have to mean that like you could be doing ijtihad in a particular area. It doesn't mean you need to comprehend everything that exists. That's that, you know, it makes sense. Greg Underwood just said that's not funny. Okay, Greg, not funny. I'll try and make it funnier. Permissible to combine Isha and Maghrib during the summer months. Yes, I believe it is. I believe it is permissible to combine between the night prayers during the summer in the UK especially, or in any of these kind of similar climates where the night is kind of squeezed and the daylight hours are so many. Right, Greg Underwood. All right, no, I'm not talking about you. Shukran. I was thinking with a surname like that, like Frank Underwood's, how could you not have a sense of humor? Right, so Mufti, what do we know about Abraham's favorite child? I don't know. What do we know about Abraham's favorite child? Abraham alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, his children, for whether it's Ishaq or Ismail, who is the favorite? I think it's difficult to say in all honesty, but I mean, I'm sure they were both beloved in that sense. I don't know, in all honesty, what to... I could just blag it like many other Maulvis, but let's just be honest for a moment. I don't know what I don't know what difference that would make either, unless you were to say, well, who was the sacrificed son? And that we mentioned, the Quran doesn't explain who the sacrificed son was, and there's ikhtilaf in the issue. So some people believed it to be Ishaq, amongst them Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Imam Malik, and some people, and the majority of Muslims probably felt it to be Ismail. My mother is losing control over her teenage children. What would you give to parents of troubled youth? that's a very real and difficult question, if I'm going to be honest. I wish I had some kind of some solution to state, or even if I could pretend there's a. The truth is that these are really just baffling times, and I don't know, because people are growing up. There's so much. The younger people are, they're growing through technology. There's so much ahead, getting so much information from different people, introjecting, if I can use that word, as is used in psychoanalysis, and in they're introjecting all these kind of ideals. That means they're kind of taking in all these other ideals, YouTube personalities, other people. I mean, I'm not saying that has to be a bad thing, but it could be, and in these forums being, I don't know, and then all this confusion. And then I think there's a first world problem as well. And the first world problem that we're going through, and this first world problem isn't just for young people, it's for all, it's for most. I don't know about the migrant communities that came to this country, whether it impacts them as much, I don't know. But definitely most, I would say, doesn't matter about, necessarily about your age, but people who are pretty much, they've lived here and become a part and parcel of this society. These first world problems are existential problems. I think and this isn't just the youth have it as well, but even people, even towards their middle ages, maybe younger, definitely, right throughout, whether it's going to be people in their teenage years, late teenage years, maybe going right up until maybe people in their 40s, for example, that they are having this kind of existential crisis where they're trying to understand that what is the purpose of anything? Like, why not just, if I can just be so blunt, why not just end it all? And you might think this is, I'm being a bit dramatic, but I'm not. It's actually real. And a lot of people are having this, and you'll see this goes back to Maslow's kind of hierarchy of needs. And you'll see that when we get over certain struggles, very essential core struggles in life of survival, and we enter a stage of amenities and luxuries, relatively speaking. I'm not saying luxuries have to be like you've got a harem of your own, although that's probably the ideal. But generally speaking, people, when we have a certain life of luxury worldwide, relatively speaking, then these things come to us that what is the point of all of these? Why are we every day? Because it gives us time to then ponder and think existentially. And it's a huge problem because there are no easy solutions to it. And people then think about, should I just and people, and this is a real problem. I mean, I could say it in a very light-hearted manner, but this problem is very real. And so, and it happens to everybody. I don't count myself as an exception. It happens to me. It happens to everybody. Like if I mean, maybe some people it hits severely, and other people it's probably like a fleeting thing, but it definitely, I think it happens to most people. They will, when in their moments, they will kind of think that what is the purpose of all of this? Why, it's like that Greek myth of the punishment given to by the gods to that character that Camus speaks about, Albert Camus. What's his name? Where he has to push the boulder up the kind of mount, up the hill, and then when it gets to the top, it just rolls back down. And he then just pushes it back up, and then it just rolls back down. And his punishment is that he must do this for an eternity. And this is what Albert Camus was kind of referring to when he was saying that the greatest problem of philosophy is really, he was saying things like suicide, because is it even worth it? Like this question, how do humans go about really answering that question? And I think that's, and I speak to people sometimes going through these difficulties, and it's a challenge. But what I would say as a pointer, obviously there's certain reminders that everybody would give, like things like always gratitude and just trying to understand just to be grateful about several things that a person has. But beyond that, I would say that it's important to actively engage your mind in something. In this first world, you have to, part of this first world problem, you have to be preoccupied, hopefully in something positive, whether it's learning something, whether it's developing a skill, whether it's pursuing an ambition, whether it's pursuing a project, a personal project, whether it's being involved in some kind, because you have to kind of plug in and just keep going at something, hopefully something which fulfills a part of you. Because I mean, it is true that our time here is finite, so why not do something that will leave some legacy? That's what I would say. It is a difficult topic, actually. And about young people as well, I wish I don't have it's difficult. We've got to kind of just assess our situation. Hopefully, maybe if we can have a certain amount of mutual compassion and but then I suppose young people don't really understand some of that until they mature. But may Allah make it easy, Ameen. Right, so let's what's this? Some Christian, why don't the Prophet or Sahaba realize that the verses they were uttering were not from Allah? I'm not sure what that means. Can we watch the World Cup? Isn't that over, the World Cup? Well, of course you can watch it. Were the Murji'ah extremists? Robert, salam from Germany. Wa alaikum assalam. Alright. I can't impersonate German yet, but there's always that you know, that sketch of that's like the last thing you want to hear, but there's always that sketch that with Hitler sitting around the table, and he's like, "My Führer," and they fit it into everything, whether it's the World Cup or anything. Yeah, so can we watch? Somebody was saying, can we watch football? Of course you can watch football. Somebody had asked about. It's gone now. Right, let's take some. All right, we've got anybody. Right, people tuning in. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum. If you click like, click share. Let's see some of these questions. I will be tackling a little later on the hadith, or the alleged people hadith, which is that, do women lack intellect and lack faith? So I'll be tackling that in a moment. A recent public figure argued that holds a right. You know, this is moving and I'm trying to stop it, and then I'm just going to end up swearing. And then somebody's going to edit it. There's going to be another bloody scandal. Right, so a recent public figure argued that Kufa holds a similar status, Amal of Ahl Madina. What's my opinion? I've asked so many people. The Shia, the only Muslim, Mutah, temporary marriage. Is that the question? What's the question? Mutah? Mutah? You want to what? You want to embark on Mutah live here on this live show? You want us all to be witnesses to this contract? Is that what? So, right, coming to that question, see, somebody had argued for the practice of Kufa, which is where Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab began and all this. You know, look, let me answer this. I've done an audio clip that should be out one of these days. It's about should we reject hadith? And I've answered that in much detail. And the answer is, in summary, it's no, we shouldn't reject hadith. And there is a distinction between sunnah and hadith. And I go into this great detail about Sahih al-Bukhari and why, basically, what is my problem with Sahih al-Bukhari? What's my beef? What's my beef with Bukhari? So that's, so I go into there, make a distinction. It's definitely, once you see it up on YouTube, do subscribe to my channel. Definitely watch that, people. I make a distinction between that Bukhari is a tripartite, is a threefold phenomenon. There's the man, the Imam, the book, and the concept. The Imam is a great person who I have no beef, so to speak. I have respect and, you know, admiration for. He was a great Imam, somebody who spent his life trying to do serve the deen in the best way he could invest his time and effort. Then there's the book, which has some questions, and then there's the concept Bukhari. Bukhari as a concept has become almost it's an infallible concept of almost a divine, it's like a demigod. So it's a new idol which Muslims have in the last century. They don't openly say it's an idol, but they treat it like an idol. Like they practically worship Sahih al-Bukhari almost. Many Muslims since the 21st century. Once again, they don't literally worship it. It's not like they get the book and bow down. But it's as Allah says in the Quran that اتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ وَرُهْبَانَهُمْ أَرْبَابًا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ, that they took their scholars to be gods other than Allah. And when the Prophet was asked that did they worship these scholars, he said no, they never worshipped them, but everything revolved around what those scholars had to say. Hence it was as though they were gods. And so in that sense, Bukhari, this concept, has become a divine kind of entity since the 21st century, and Islam has become Bukhari centric. So everything, Allah, His Messenger, the Quran, Hadith, Sunnah, Fiqh, everything must revolve around Bukhari. So this is my problem. So I've kind of feel that it's a responsibility to now take those axes to grind and to kind of smash these idols the way Ibrahim alayhi salam took an axe to the idols. And hence I've gone about showing that Sahih al-Bukhari nobody can trace back Sahih al-Bukhari to the author. Nobody, beyond reasonable doubt. And I mean that. There's nobody that can do that right now. So, and I discussed that in much detail in the previous kind of episodes as well. I've gone through that. Right, so Wajjuh is saying, Johnny Bravo. Hi, Johnny Bravo. Right, so that's my issue with Bukhari per se. Okay, that's the concept. And the book, the issue is that we can't prove it, we can't trace it back to the Imam. But the good news with all of this, people, is there's no need to panic. There's no need to panic. Hold your horses, people. Hold your horses. The great news is that Islam was well preserved way before, a century before, 100 years before any hadith began to be preserved. The Sunnah, I'm talking about the Sunnah, was preserved. So you have to understand that as soon as Islam came about, people started to practice. They wanted to know how to pray, how to do things, how do you fast, what breaks the fast, how do you pay zakat, how do you do the hajj. So Muslims were already practicing Islam way before the documentation of hadith began. So the hadith, which was an attempt to preserve the Sunnah was already being preserved as a living tradition. So it was an Amal. It was a lived tradition that existed in each city. Now in Medina it existed, hence Imam Malik speaks of the Amal. Now in my understanding, each key city would have had its own living tradition. It would have had a practiced Islam that was there, like that their fathers and forefathers were already on. Like, how do you pray? They already knew how to pray. They already would see people how they fold the arms or what they do. And so as an example, let's take Kufa as an example. Now in Kufa is one of the cities that as a whole abandoned raf'ul yadayn in salah. They did not used to raise their hands in between the movements in salah. Now they learnt that from their fathers and their fathers going back to the companions. And that was their lived tradition. That was the living tradition of Islam they had. Now, 120 years later, 130 years later, they found a hadith saying, oh, you should raise your hands. Do you really think they're going to abandon their tradition and now say, oh, well, we found a hadith? Of course they're not. Hence, they never did. Hence, when Imam Abu Hanifa was told about Raf'ul Yadayn, he just said, and what? Like, we don't... It wasn't to them. They already had a living tradition of Islam. They didn't need one isolated narration to come. Why didn't they all kind of champion this thing as the living tradition? Why didn't they do that? Imam Malik successfully managed to pull that off because he was in Medina. And Medina is Medina. Wah, 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 wah. Medina... What is it? Medina, Medina, oh. So because Imam Malik was in Medina, he managed to pull that off. Because he said this was the city of the Prophet. The other people, they were a bit unsuccessful in pulling it off successfully. I think some of them tried, but it wasn't as... it didn't have the swag with it, if you like. So it kind of flopped a bit. And then the later scholars started to justify it by trying to show hadith. So it's an interesting discussion. I hope that answers a few things. One, the books of hadith. Because, look, the practice of the sunnah is already preserved. I'm not calling to abandon the sunnah. It's already preserved in all the fiqh. So, and in the practice and the living tradition, the amal, things like this. So, and the hadith books are there, and the hadith books are awesome. We take them, we check their chains, but the main thing is we look at the content. As long as it doesn't clash with the three, the Trinity, so it doesn't clash against God, the Son, and sorry, wrong religion. As long as it doesn't clash with Brahma, Vishnu, and wrong Trinity again. So as long as it doesn't clash with reason, right? It doesn't clash with the sources, the original sources, and it doesn't clash with the principles of Islam, then it's a green light. It's a go ahead. Going ahead with that. Full steam ahead, people. Full steam ahead. So I hope that makes sense. So what's going down, people? What's going down? Alright, rock on. So are there definite times, also backup singers? There are definitely times I feel like you were, yeah, you're one of the backup singers in a Qawwali group. True, that changed the whipping. You know what it is? I've only got like 2 lines to see these questions. To feed of the feet in wudu to washing. Is it true that Umar changed the wiping of the feet to washing the feet? No, that's not true. I don't know if that's some Shia propaganda or not. I don't know. But I mean, that's not true because the clear verse of the Quran. When I seek knowledge from Islamic YouTube videos, there's always a man whining like a violin in the background in these videos. Are Muslims too emotional? Hell yeah, Muslims are emotional. We feed off emotions. We are emotions. We are the embodiment of emotions. Sheikh, how do you move your index finger in salah? Okay, Awais. Well, the Malikiyah you see, in tashahhud, your right hand, which is on your kind of knee or end of your thigh, knee, right? In the Maliki method, the school of Medina, the way it works is we kind of have it like this, fist up, and we go like this. So it's like that. It just kind of moves. So it's a bit like you're going trigger happy, like does. But you're not, your finger ain't like that, it's straight. And you're just going like that. So you just kind of move it at an average pace. So if somebody comes, you're kind of going like, That's how I generally, and that's how the Malikiya generally do that. Is it permissible to pray Fajr when you naturally wake up? Yes, I mean, if you wake up, you pray Fajr. I would say in these countries, in this part of the world, you see, in Islam, there is no obligation to place an alarm clock. You have to understand that. So you just go to sleep. When you wake up, you pray. That's what the Hadith said. Because it's different. In some parts of the world, the whole world wakes up. That part of the world at dawn. So if you live in warmer countries, hot countries, especially where it's not urban, so you'll get a lot of people that you can buy it. Right, you mean Abu Fulan? I don't know, I've missed some of these questions. Alright, so in Islam, right, okay. In Islam, can a woman divorce a man if he cannot perform in the bed? Huh? What is this question? Is this equally a stronger reason for giving khula when the man does not work? Can she give the talaq if he's not performing the talaq in the bed? How is he supposed to be performing the talaq in the bed? It's like talaq. She's like, well, no, you obviously didn't perform that very well, did you? So, right. So, oh well, the answer is, can she seek a talaq if there is a lack of intimacy, excuse my pardon me français, if there is a lack of intimacy, yes, of course she can. That's it's consortium is right. The full intimacy is part and parcel of a relationship. I mean, it's up to people. I mean, if they don't want to be intimate, that's up to them. It's not that they have to seek separation, but if they wanted to, that is sufficient grounds. Right, so come on, guys, it's 2018. It is indeed. Right, so what's going on? What was I saying before that, before I got distracted with that interesting question? Yeah, she should. Yeah, I mean, it's up to her. But yes, I mean, he could seek help. He could go to the doctor. He could say, well, you know, there's some. he could raise his concerns. Raise, wrong word. He could highlight his concerns for a choice of better words with the doctor and say, look. He could say, well, there's an issue. And I'm sure a lot of the medicine, I'm sure it works. My friend told me, Kasme. But yeah, so I'm sure they could go get some medicine. And I'm sure that should help. If it doesn't help, there's other methods. There's a lot of science has gone a long way, people. Right, so you can seek a lot of, and then worst case, I mean, if she, you know, or it's up to her. If she's unhappy, you have the right. But you gotta say, sometimes the things I hear, sometimes some people's what people get up to. Toba. sometimes I'm like, and I thought I had an imagination. When some people tell me some issues, I'm like, huh? I'm like, acha? Aisa bhi hota hai ka? Is it like that as well? Okay. So yeah. So what's she gonna do? 30-day trial. What's this? M-Tech says, what's she gonna do? 30-day trial until she finds the right man. I mean, look. I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean? Tell us any comments on Nawaz Sharif. Well, Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan has gone to jail. Alhamdulillah, walillah alhamd. Although I don't know how long he will stay there. And I sure hope that Imran Khan becomes the new Prime Minister of Pakistan. I hope, inshallah. He's the only person who I have some faith in that could bring some future, some hope to Pakistan. Pakistan is a failed state, man. It's a terrible state of affairs. It's shocking to learn that in the 60s, Pakistan was leading in Asia in several aspects of economics and in things like aviation and in stuff like this, that the airline was one of the first key airlines in Asia and all this kind of stuff, and how they helped set up other nations like things like Singapore and other kind of countries, and today they're so far behind. It's amazing. Why are divorced families often ostracized from the Islamic communities? Is that so? I mean, are divorced families ostracized? I don't think so. I think we've moved away from a lot of... I think divorce... You see, people get upset that why is there more and more divorce going on? To me, I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily see these things as a good or a bad thing. To me, it's not a... Like, I don't assign value judgments to things like divorce. To me, it's about... you know, these are just relationships. They're just human projects, or projects ain't the right word, but human kind of efforts. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. You know, it's not like today people measure each other and they measure up, they try to measure up through a relationship. So they try to say, well, you know, oh, so-and-so is in a relationship, so they must be really like living it. And so-and-so, you know, if they're single, they're not living it. Or if, I don't know, I think these things are not, these things are wrong, I think. We shouldn't really be ascribing value or success labels on people based on relationships. People, you know, let them live their life. You know, in Mauritania, for example, speaking of, in Mauritania, where there's so many scholars, everybody's like a hafiz of they memorize everything. The women actually have it's a kind of social thing to have as many husbands as you can. It gives them kind of like a like kind of swag, like street cred, if that's the right word. But they kind of pride themselves on how many husbands they've had. So you'll have like, the women will mock other women who've only had like one husband. That's a culture, bloody hell! Like, just think of that. Like, it'd be quite like, for men, it'd probably be like a bit intimidating. Woman would be like, "Huh, you're nothing. You're only number 143." Right? So, but it's true. I'm not joking. This is actually and it's a very Islamic society. Mauritania, it's like a desert. But the women there, and you just have to go YouTube this, there's documentaries on it. All women generally will go through so many husbands throughout their lives, and they'll just kind of at some point just divorce, even if there's no issue, and they'll just be like, yeah, you know what, I think it's not all that anymore. Let's call it quits. and they'll just be gone. Like, somebody was telling me that they were like, they were there in Mauritania, and they were telling me how this one woman, for example, she was like, yeah, you know, I think with her husband, I think we should just now So he's like, yeah, all right, cool. And everybody's cool with it. And then she was like, I'm thinking of marrying your friend. And then he was like, yeah, all right, yeah, he's an all right guy. It's amazing. Like, you wouldn't imagine that from a very Islamic kind of community thinking like this. And they do. This is Mauritania. This is all social people. We have made up these cultural myths. We have kind of brought this to the table. These things don't really exist. You know, this kind of like having relationships, like a woman should never have a kind of relationship, or she should never be like, this is all social. You know, like I got into a conversation with somebody once, and they were speaking about, it was an interesting conversation, but they're speaking about, like, let's say, this particular case, let's say of a woman having multiple affairs, yeah? So she's had, like, let's say she's had, like, several flings with, so I don't know, let's say 5 guys, 6 guys, I don't know, whatever. Let's say several guys. We can, even if they were, like, let's say, whatever. Now this was an issue for her getting married. But we were having this discussion, and I was just highlighting that, look, this is just a social thing we've got in our heads. Like, look, what difference would it make if like, so for example, if somebody said now to this, let's say to a person, oh, she didn't have a fling with 3 people, but she had 3 nikahs, let's say. And then it's like, oh, that's all okay. But really, like, what's the difference? Like, I mean, I understand there's, like, you're going to say, well, there's a religious difference, but put the religious thing aside for a moment. There's no practical kind of difference going on. If you said, well, she had a nikah and it didn't work out, she had another nikah, it didn't work out, another nikah, it didn't work out. And, like, so it's really just in our minds, all of this. Like, us judging people is really just in our minds. Otherwise, what's the difference? You know, like, it's not. And I think sometimes even stuff like, it's an interesting discussion, even things like zina and all of these, which are very clearly kind of named as an abomination in the Quran and stuff like this. It's interesting how the focus of latter-day Muslims has kind of zeroed in on just the sexual act. And upon kind of, I don't know, like upon deeper inspection, you think, well, could it be simply the act? Because the act is the same act in a nikah. So how could that be evil? Like, it's the same, it's not really any different apart from, you know, I mean, if you're simply talking about having sexual activity, whether it's in a nikah or outside of a nikah, the activity per se is exactly the same. It's not something different. So what is it that was the abomination? It must have been something more. How about the kind of deception? How about the whole misleading, the breaking of trust, all of these things? As opposed to simply the act, which people have zeroed in on. Because the act is the same in all, you know, whether it's a normal nikah. So, I don't know, these were just some thoughts. Sometimes I just throw them out at the universe. and a few fatwas of kufr come back at me. The universe just says, kafir. Look at us, all these angry faces. Oh my God. Yes, salam. Who's this angry? Admin. Get on to that angry face. Right, so what do you think about concepts that this universe is the first heaven? I think in the Quran, when things like heavens and the skies were used, these were just kind of symbolic terms. They don't actually mean literal kind of like skies. They may have meant certain, like it may have meant in, like, so for example, could have it been referring to galaxies and universes and things like, it could have, but I think these were just symbolic. They weren't Do you understand? So that's my understanding. So, talk to our Shia brethren. What's our Shia brethren got to do with? Oh, is that the Mutah issue? The Mutah issue I've mentioned before. Look, there's no point going over it. That several Sunni scholars have allowed it as well. It's not something which was only, you know, amongst them the great Maliki scholar Ibn Ashur, for example, and other people as well. And I will be getting a detailed book by a contemporary Maliki it's titled Zawajul Mut'ah, a marriage of Mut'ah, Qira'atun Jadida fil Fikr Sunni, that a new revised reading according to Sunni thought. It seems very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. When I get hold of it, I'll give you guys the summary. Right, what does the heaven mean if paradise is actually referred to as Jannah? Yeah, you see, in Arabic, heavens doesn't mean heaven like, so in Arabic, sama means like sky. So Allah says sab'a samawat, 7 skies. People translate that as heavens. This is our kind of Christian influence coming in, where we have this understanding of heaven, the sky. Otherwise, heaven per se, like in Arabic, heaven, paradise, if you want to, that kind of heaven, meant garden, the garden, because the Arabs always dreamed of gardens because they lived in deserts, you see. So Ibn Ashur permits mut'ah. What else do you need? Hey, I'm not pushing Ibn Ashur into it. He's saying it himself. It's in his tafsir. What do you want me to do? Lie. You know, I can't lie. Toba, 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 toba. So that's celestial spheres, heavens. All right, fair enough. Look at the translation. Jannah, the root means safe. Oh, you mean like from Junnah, like from shield and things like this. Did Ibn Taymiyyah believe hell isn't eternal? Well, Wilmsman Hodgebrock, that's an awesome question. Ibn Taymiyyah, the new recreated father of the Wahhabiyah, right? Ibn Taymiyyah himself was not a Salafi, just to be clear, because the Salafi movement didn't exist back then. But Ibn Taymiyyah was a Hanbali, and he was... Robert is asking, are you proud on your blacklist superiority? You know, as I've said before, Jahan hum khade hote hain, line wahin se shuru hoti hai. Wherever I stand, that's where the line starts from. So people can do whatever the hell they want. Let me give that a twirl and then say, like I care about these people. So, oh, on that note, I hear there's is there another upcoming refutation against me by Lion Sheikh? I've seen somebody sent me a poster today about some of the scholars in Birmingham, amongst them Sheikh Asrar and a few others, going to be doing a lecture soon, refuting the modern reformist. I don't know who, God knows who that could be. But yeah, so anyway, coming back to more important matters. Like I've said to all of these people, I would want to happily, in a dialogue, sit. If you want to debate, anybody wants a debate, they've got to be a scholar first. Not just wasting my time on nobodies. Secondly, it's got to be a dialogue. Anybody, as long as they're going to talk, and they're a scholar, and we're going to talk it out. Not like this old Indo-Pak style of you just give a lecture, I give a lecture. If anybody wants a dialogue, I is right here. Here I am, people. Here I am. So, bro, come to New York. Girls would give anything to have a sugar daddy, huh? Yeah. What, why is, are you trying to create a scandal on my life? You disgrace Islam. Ahmed Sayyid says, you disgrace Islam. The power, is that the power slam? Or is that the like the body slam? Which slam do I... Look at the accusations. Hadith dealing with must have rules of the legal field, plan people to state and manage their finances. Is it haram for me to sell their accounts that grow with interest? I've already mentioned, if you watch my video on YouTube about interest, mortgages, loans, all these kind of things, I've explained how in this day and age, those things per se, the way they are, do not apply because the narrative has entirely changed. So they were hinged on a particular narrative. The economic structure has changed of the world. The infrastructure has changed. Monetization has changed. The issue in the ancient world was money could not be produced out of nothing. Today, it can. So that's, in a way, a game changer. Now, one could argue that, okay, have we... But we haven't caught up. Islamic fiqh hasn't caught up with any of this. We haven't even caught up with... Right now, they're on 3.0. We're still on 1.0. So it's talking about, you know, mineral, gold, silver, stuff like this. Then they've turned it to paper, then digitalized. So that's like 2.0, 3.0. So it's literally creating finances, exponential growth of economy and prosperity out of nothing. Wow, people. That is the greatest story that humans have ever told, honestly. I've got to, on that story, you've got to give it to humans. Yeah? Buddy. As Aziz Mia used to do. Zalim cheese this insan. But it's, think of it, the story of money is the most amazing human story ever. And we have taken it now to such heights that it's digitalized. It's literally out of nothing. And I'm not saying there isn't oppression. I'm not saying there isn't these things. But what I'm trying to say is those particular rulings all to do with interest are no longer in sync. Yes, a loan shark culture would be forbidden because it would meet up with the oppressive element. But the other things of just interest and surplus, these things don't add up anymore because there's way too many nets involved. A follow-up question of mine about interest, because I think it's important about, what's this? Instead of just asking about sex and criticizing each other, when you say it's okay because the money we place into the accounts are invested further and grow due to the investment. Hi, instead of asking about the sex, I don't know. Good point though, Ali Chaudhry Saab. Good point though. So, Ibn Taymiyyah, right, that's what I was talking about. What value is of paper? Value is only in enjoyment. But what's the value of gold? Who said gold had any value? Is it but just a rock found in the earth? وَالتِّبْرُ كَالتُّرْبِ مُلْقَى فِي أَمَاكِنِهِ, as Imam Shafi'i said. وَالْعُودُ فِي أَرْضِهِ نَوْعٌ مِّنَ الْحَطَبِ. Allah. He said, what is gold but just like scattered rocks in the earth? And what is oud except just a twig on a tree? You know. إِن تَغَرَّبَ هَذَا عَزَّ مَطْلَبُهُ. If you take this out of its place, it becomes valuable. وَإِن تَغَرَّبَ ذَاكَ عَزَّ كَالذَّهَبِ. And if you take that out of its place, the gold, it becomes gold. So this is all in our minds, people. I love that meme where the person holds up monopoly money and real money and says the difference between these is just in your mind. But that's what I love about the human ability. Homo sapiens, we have killed it, people. We have killed it with our ability, seriously, to create narratives and imaginative realities. One could argue religion is but an imaginative reality. I mean, obviously, I mean, in several ways, all these rules and laws that come, they just come because Allah ordains them, in our understanding, because they're just rules and laws which we've made up as human beings. And it's just for us to come get by. Hence, they keep changing for each nation. Is it necessary for scholars to find historical scholars to validate religious position? It's not necessary, but it's helpful. It's helpful to have scholarly precedent. Right, we were speaking about Ibn Taymiyyah. Right now, Ibn Taymiyyah, who was a Hanbali, he actually denied the eternality, people. Is that a word? Sometimes I don't know. I don't know where I'm blagging or where. Right. So the eternality of hell, of the hellfire. He said that hell will not be eternal. Now that's interesting because it goes against clear verses of the Quran. But I like it. I like it. It's daring, this one. This one's interesting. I like it. But look at the cojones. Look at the courage that he's had to kind of go against such clear understandings. He said, like, it's not eternal. I don't care, in other words. And look, the interesting thing, all these people who practically bend over in admiration, in total awe of Ibn Taymiyyah, you know, obviously, Taqiyuddin, Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, don't get me wrong, was a great scholar. Great scholar. This one great, you know, to see great. He was great. Nobody's denying that. But there were many greater than him. Many greater than him. You know, he was great. But relatively speaking, he was just okay. Relatively, obviously, compared to, I'm not saying compared to somebody like me. I'm saying in the past, relatively speaking, he was just okay. Okay, this one, okay. Nothing that spectacular. But obviously, people who kind of today, he is the alpha and omega of everything, of Islamic scholarship. Especially to the Salafis and some of the Deobandis, and these people are like, they bend over, oh, can't get enough of Ibn Taymiyyah. So Ibn Taymiyyah, you see, when he made this statement that hell is not eternal, do you see them calling him a kafir? No, God forbid. God forbid. This one, not nice, this one. God forbid. No, no, no. He can't be a kafir. He can't be a kafir. And then they tried to say that, oh, we found another opinion of his where he says it is eternal, so that must be his opinion. Look at the games. These games. Right? And then his student, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, is very clear that hell is not eternal. So they can't manage to save him, but they let him just, they throw him under the bus to save Ibn Taymiyyah. So they say, we got to do over one of them, so what the hell, let him be the scapegoat. So they throw Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah under the bus, and they save Ibn Taymiyyah by trying to say, well, Ibn Taymiyyah was okay, he believed it for a little while, but then he kind of came back. He came back to the truth, the haqq. But Ibn Qayyim had too far gone. Even though Ibn Qayyim in his book says, my teacher, my sheikh also believed it. But anyway, so do they consider Ibn Taymiyyah a kafir? They consider him a fasiq. Do they consider him astray? Who said that the satanic verses were legitimate? Take a guess. Oh, Ibn Taymiyyah. Oh. Ibn Taymiyyah said the satanic verses were legitimate. He actually believed that the Prophet said these made-up verses of the Quran to please the kuffar. Check this out, that the Prophet made up. But they say, oh, no, the Prophet The Prophet was silent and the devil was speaking, and he was using the voice of the Prophet. So people were thinking that's the Prophet. And this is making up verses of the Quran. Can you believe this? Ibn Taymiyyah. No, I'm not saying this. Don't take my word for it. Go to the Salafiyya, Wahhabiyya websites. Go to Sheikh Salih al-Munajjid. Go to his website. See his discussion on it. He says, yes, it is true, this one, you know, Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah. But it's okay, this one okay, no big problem, this one okay. So he says that there's some hadith and it's okay to believe that. Is he a kafir for accusing the Prophet of fabricating the Quran? No. Is he a fasiq? No. Is he astray? No. I say something like Jesus ain't gonna come back and oh my God, kafir. So these are our tolerance levels, people. But yeah, so Ibn Taymiyyah, to be fair though to Ibn Taymiyyah, he has some really awesome fatwa where he's forward thinking. I like even his hell one. I like it. It's good. I like his way of thinking. What he's trying to say is the mercy of Allah it surpasses his punishment, and I like that. That's to me the true understanding of Islam. So I think on those things he's got an interesting point. And on other fatwa he's got like he was gutsy. He was a bit like he was prepared to just say something. He didn't have to follow a trend, and I like that about him. In Aqidah he was let's just say in Aqidah, unfortunately he didn't take his medicine, so he was in Aqidah you can just switch off. When he's speaking about belief, he's so unfortunately anthropomorphic. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Ameen, 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 ameen. I'm not against Ibn Taymiyyah, I'm not against him. But I don't like the way people almost worship him. That's a different point. But he himself he wasn't okay kind of, he was definitely a good, like a solid sheikh. I give that to him. I don't know about calling him the sheikh of Islam, but definitely okay, this one, okay. People, shall we take a look at this hadith? If I go to hell, hell must be very short. Like not even a split second, please. Ignore the fact, is the Ameen a Christian influence? That's interesting. Is Ameen a Christian influence? There would have to be a study into that, because I like this. Who was that? Was that Robert? Robert, Bob, you. But I like this way of thinking. Let's look at discourse analysis. Let's look at concepts. So did the Arabs used to use the word Ameen before Islam came? My understanding is I think they did, but there would have to be some research done into that to look at their poetry and stuff like this, and did they used to use that? So if they did, then, which that's what my understanding is, they did used to use Ameen, then in that case it's something that was long already prevalent in their society. Okay. Did Nuh alayhi salam live for 950 years? No, he did not. Huh? You going against the Quran? You kafir? Hold your horses, people. Hold your horses. Brace yourselves. Brace yourselves. Brace yourselves. Nuh alayhi salam did not live for 1,000 years like what people think. But if you look at this verse of the Quran, okay, you're going to have to, people, brace yourselves for this, okay. Now, Allah mentions about Nuh alayhi salam, فَلَبِثَ فِي قَوْمِهِ, that he stayed, like he was amongst his people, that he was, what is it? It mentions, what is it? أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا خَمْسِينَ عَامًا, isn't it? So, yeah. So he stayed amongst his people 1,000 years, except 50 years. Now what's interesting here is, why did Allah use different words to refer to the word year? So those of you that speak Arabic, and I'm sure there's some here, that why did Allah say yeah, so that's correct. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ. So let me just bring this up. Don't want to misread it. Right, so we've got this here. Yeah, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ, that we sent Nuh alayhi salam to his people. فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا فَأَخَذَهُمُ الطُّوفَانُ وَهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. Right, now this, for example, in Surah Ankabut. Now you've got here that Allah says we sent Nuh to his people and he remained amongst them. فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ. Right, so 1,000 sana إِلَّا 50 عَامًا, except 50 عام. Now sana means year and am means year in Arabic. Why did Allah use two different words to refer to year? Why did he use two different words? Right, why not say sana, sana, am, am? So one obvious, one kind of thing you have is where people say that, well, oh, this is just for language rhetoric to make it sound good, so it has a flow. So, you know, Allah doesn't want to repeat the same word. Point. That's a point. We've got to be fair, it's a point. But then tell me, people, could not Allah just say 950 years? What's so difficult about Allah saying, you know, that 900 sana wa 50, that there is, you know, that there was, or if you want to use am, you know, or sana, just one to say 950 years. Why say 1,000 years, ألف سنة إلا 50 عام, except 50 years? Right, now this is, so some people have argued that there is a linguistic difference between sana and am. Okay, what I'm going to, now I want to highlight that difference and say that, look, this was not just mentioned as a coincidence. It was much greater than what people took it to be. So people thought, oh, this is just, Allah's just using a style. Like he doesn't want to say, you know, alfa sana illa 50 sana, so he just changed the word. That's low-level thought. I'm going to take us to high-level thinking. Okay. Recently, okay, we have, and this is recently, there's been great discoveries, archaeological findings, people, of the great kingdoms that existed, that were the antediluvian kingdoms, the kingdoms which existed pre-flood time, especially around what would be modern day, let's say the Middle East, Iraq, like the kingdom of Sumer, kingdom of Ar, like these kind of, and what later on went on to become places like Mesopotamia and all these. But much before all of that, before Babylon, before these, you had the Sumerian, the kingdom of Sumer. So we're dating back thousands of years, and then after them they were split different kind of civilizations. So they're the kind of people who came up with things like discovered the wheel, and discovered or created the wheel, and even split up time into 60, like let's say 60 minutes within an hour and all this kind of stuff. Now, a lot of the archaeological findings have been recently found. And they've actually, one thing that the Sumerian civilization and other civilizations did was they documented certain things extensively. And they had this thing called like cuneiform, where they would write, they had their kind of very early way of writing, which was a bit like hieroglyphics, a bit like that. And they would put that into stone, like into this kind of clay, and then harden it as stone. So it would just turn into kind of stone. So this is why these kind of tablets have been well preserved, and what they wrote these things on, these cuneiform kind of legacy that we find. So in there, they've got a lot of the rules of their kings. So, and you can find this on Google. You can go to, like, for example, the Sumerian kings and their rule. How long did they rule? So it's really interesting when you start reading their rule. They will say, well, such and such, these 3 kings ruled for 300 and whatever 60,000 years. And you'll think, what? And they'll say, and this king ruled for 20,000 years, and this king ruled for, and they seem to count like ridiculous figures. Now, at first, yeah, so this is before Gilgamesh, by the way. This is before Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh comes a bit later on. Now, the interesting thing is that these people, at first people thought this was exaggeration. Then they realized actually they're going by a particular system. They're not actually just randomly making things up. They had a particular system. Some people felt that they've kind of done their own calculations. You can Google it. But they felt that maybe they times everything by 60. And hence they had this kind of, obsession ain't the right word, but this kind of, this strong affinity with 60. Hence they divided the hour into 60 minutes and things like this. A lot of these things were divided into 60 for degrees and stuff like this. Now, sometimes maybe in the hundreds they times multiplied numbers when they counted. So they would say, well, such and such a king ruled for this time, and this king came, and this king came, and they had excessive numbers. And then you see the numbers start to change. These are antediluvian, which means before the flood, and then post-diluvian you start to see the numbers are still huge, but they become massively shorter in the hundreds. So you start to see that, well, the system seems to have changed. And this is what I believe that people in the Old Testament, some of the Jews had inherited in their time when they were in Babylon and these other kingdoms. Maybe they never fully understood them, but they kind of logged them in the Old Testament as such and such person being around for 800 years or 600 years. This is what it may have been. So when Allah is referring to Nuh alayhi salam, he's referring to something that of his time. The alfa sanatin is going by the time that they were using, except minus a 50 years, which would be our time, 50 years. So there is great divine wisdom in Allah mentioning the distinction between the two words. And this is not new. So you would see when Allah refers to, so for example, when Allah is referring to Yusuf alayhi salam, and the king calls him, Allah does not refer to the king as a pharaoh, because in their time the pharaoh thing hadn't been set up yet. Even though later there was the great, especially in that part of Egypt, and there was a great pharaoh dynasty, and people knew the Egyptian kings as pharaohs, but in Yusuf alayhi salam's time, they were not pharaohs yet. They were just kings. So Allah addresses them by their reality. Although when Allah speaks of Moses, he addresses him as Pharaoh. Another interesting thing, when you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, even according to biblical sources, changes at a certain point in his life. He goes back and, between his travels of Canaan and him traveling, at a certain point he actually changes his name. And this is part of his transformation of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But you notice that in, like for example, Surah Baqarah, all the way, when Ibrahim, the word has been written, it is omitted. It's not actually written as with the ya, Ibrahim. Although people still pronounce it, read it like that, but it's not written like that. It actually has no ya. Whereas in all the other places in the Quran, when Ibrahim is written, it has the ya. Now that's an interesting discussion. That, well, why is Ibrahim being written differently? Is this something to do with when he changed his name? Because Even according to biblical narrations, he changes a variation of his name during his life as part of his transformation. What I'm trying to say is that when Allah addresses certain narratives in the Quran, at times he reflects the reality which they were upon. And that may not make sense to you at this point. And hence with time, you see, like these discoveries of the Sumerian civilization are not so long ago. They weren't discovered in the time of the early Arabs, for example, and many civilizations did not know them. These are quite relatively recent. So, and with time, the Quran unfolds its majesty with new meanings. You see, like this is what I mean. Like this is an amazing kind of feature really for people. And some people, you know, they may not welcome this kind of a look towards the Quran, but to me this is much more grounded. Okay, so that I hope adds some clarity. Let's take a look, guys, at this hadith. Right, there's a question. This is a hadith analysis we're going to do. There's a question that did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam refer to women as lacking intellect and lacking faith? Right, it's not a laughing matter, but you see, look, before I begin this topic, I want to say, look, there's a lot of stereotypes, there's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of, I know sometimes women don't appreciate them, which makes sense. There's a lot of these kind of jokes about women sometimes, or let's say women can't drive, or people will say things, or are they really intelligent, and stuff like this. Now, me as a person, yeah, I'm all up for humor, and humor has no bounds with somebody like me, okay? And that's one thing. And if a person says certain things out of humor, or maybe people may not appreciate that sense of humor, and some people may find it funny, others may find it maybe offensive, and that's the nature of humor. However, it is an entirely different thing saying that the Prophet of God said that, because that's a whole different discourse. You see, people in their own circles, in their own gatherings, in their own, may say all sorts. Like, people have stereotypes. People are not in, let's just be honest, humor or whatever, or even discussions, or people trying to punchline jokes, or the best kind of things are usually the worst in terms of political correctness. But that's one topic of discussion, and it's an entirely different thing to say, attribute these things to the Prophet of God. To say Islam is saying these things, because then you're giving something a religious validation. You're trying to say Allah is saying this, the Messenger of God is saying this. You're not saying, oh, this is some kind of a ha 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 ha, you know, this is just humor, or, you know, it's just a joke, a bad joke. You're trying to say, no, 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 this is actually not only factual, but God is saying these things. Now, in the past, I had been asked this question, and I thought that this was in the past, I felt that this was a kind of joke. This is what I felt. However, upon further inspection and revisiting, and some people, I had some discussions with some people, and, you know, sometimes we don't, like the hadith, they're kind of fleeting. So I've not, like, I remembered certain words of the hadith, I don't remember the full context. And I had a discussion with somebody, and he said, no, 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 look, the context of the hadith is nothing to do with humor, and it's nothing to do with this and that. And so I thought, okay, let me revisit the hadith. And I did, and I stand corrected. This hadith, this has nothing to do with humor. I'm going to read this hadith and demonstrate today that this hadith is inauthentic. It is not true. And I'll show the many problems with this attribution, misattribution to the Prophet, which is part of those hadith that have been falsely or wrongly attributed, and they have insulted Islam as a consequence. So I'm going to take a look at this. Let me read out one text. So I'll take the example of the one in Bukhari, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this one from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that he came out one day fi adha, on Eid al-Adha, or fi Eid al-Fitr, or on the Eid al-Fitr, so it was one of the two Eids, to the Musalla, to the place of prayer, فَمَرَّ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, and then he passed by the women, فَقَالَ يَا مَعْشَرَ النِّسَاءِ, he said, O women, تَصَدَّقْنَا, give in charity, فَإِنِّي رَأَيْتُكُنَّ, for indeed I have come to know of you, or I have seen you to be, أَكْثَرَ أَهْلِ النَّارِ, most of the inhabitants of the fire of hell. فَقُلْنَا, they said, وَبِمَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, why? Why would that be the case? قَالَ, he said, تُكْثِرْنَ اللَّعَنْ, because you excessively swear, وَتَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرِ, and you are ungrateful, especially to your husbands or people who cater for you. مَا رَأَيْتُ مِن نَاقِصَاتِ عَقْلٍ, I have not seen women, I have not seen humans, as in females, but here it refers to female humans, who lack intellect and faith, ودين أذهب, who can do away للب الرجل الحازم, with the determination of a resolute man, من إحدى كنا, than one of you. Meaning, like, how you women can like allure or tempt or distract a man that is so focused is just like, whoa, it's like that. فَقُلْنَا, so the women said, وَمَا نُقْصَانُ دِينِنَا وَعَقْلِنَا, and what is that we lack in our intellect and faith, Ya Rasulullah? So he said that أَلَيْسَ شَهَادَةُ الْمَرْأَةِ مِثْلُ نِصْفِ شَهَادَةِ الرَّجُلِ, isn't the testimony of a woman half the testimony of a man? They said, indeed. قَالَ فَذَلِكَ مِن نُقْصَانِ عَقْلِهَا, he said that is the lack of her intellect. أَلَيْسَ إِذَا حَاضَتْ, isn't it if she is menstruating, لَمْ تُصَلِّ وَلَمْ تَصُمْ, she does not fast nor pray? They said, indeed. قَالَ فَذَلِكَ نُقْصَانُ دِينِهَا, they said that is he said that is the lack of their deen. Okay, right, people, those of you just tuning in, if you click like and share, I'd like you to share this. I'm going to go through an analysis of showing why this hadith is a false attribution to our Prophet. Okay, now that's the narration in summary. I will go through the chains to show why these chains are problematic, but I'll do that in a moment. There's no point doing that immediately. I will tell you that this hadith with varied wording is transmitted by 4 companions, mainly 2, by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and by Ibn Umar. So there's 4 narrations each to both of these. Then by Abu Huraira on 2 narrations, and then 1 narration by Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. Okay, right, now what is the issue with this? Right, first of all, it's so obvious. Let's just start with whenever we see a hadith, let's take the words of Ibn al-Jawzi. That's not Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, who we mentioned earlier on. This is Ibn al-Jawzi, who precedes him much earlier on. In fact, Ibn al-Jawzi is the one who set up the school in which generations later Ibn Qayyim, his father, was kind of the caretaker and the kind of, he managed the school, hence he's known as Qayyim al-Jawziyah, and this is his son. But Ibn al-Jawzi, the Hanbali scholar, he in one of his works on hadith he highlights, as do other scholars, that a hadith, for it to be valid, it cannot go against reason. لم يباين المعقول, لم يخالف المنقول, it cannot go against established sources of the Quran and established Sunnah. ولم يناقض الأصول, it cannot uproot a principle. Also, in one of his works, he has about fabricated hadith. He speaks, how can you identify a hadith to be wrong and false? He says, look at the wording. If you find contradictions, or you find rakaka, you find it's poorly worded, like the wording is poor in its, whether it's its grammar or its style, that's enough to know that this cannot be the words of the Prophet. Okay, let's take a look at the Quran. Now this hadith teaches us a few things. If we take, let's call this a hadith for a moment. This teaches us a few things. One, it teaches us that women are supposed to be the majority inhabitants of the hellfire. Let's look at the Quran. There is nothing, not only is there nothing in the Quran that supports that view, but actually the Quran outright contradicts that view. The Quran speaks on all occasions to Bani Adam. Ya ayyuhan nas, O the children of Adam, O mankind. In fact, mainly placing an emphasis always, just by the nature of its language, on the male listeners. Now it does include females, but it never ever leans in towards the females. And if ever, it's either gender neutral or it's kind of inclining towards males and speaking about people and the afterlife and people and damnation. It never makes gender differentiation ever in the Quran. Right, so this seems to be a new principle which is going up against the Quran to start off with. Okay. The other thing is, this seems to show that women have an inherent deficiency. Okay. This hadith it's apparently showing that. Once again, when you look at the Quran shows that humans as a whole are kind of like deficient creatures. Like خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Insan has been created weak. Allah does not say women have been created weak. He says insan has been created weak. On all the occasions, Allah shows insan to be somebody that is forgetful, that is ghafil, that is, you know, they're distracted, or they kind of like ungrateful, they turn away, they don't listen. Insan. Right. Beginning that this is the progeny of Adam, that وَلَقَدْ عَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ Adam, that we had this covenant with Adam, فَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا, and we did not find him to be of resolute determination. And that's Adam. And then this is his offspring, alayhi salam. And so that's the Quran clearly gives a different picture altogether. There's no such thing about the Quran trying to make gender differentiation at all. At all. In terms of the fire of hell and stuff like this, at all. Or that insan has been created weak, but women are weaker. It doesn't create, and I'm not talking about a physical kind of weakness, I'm talking about a kind of capacity. Okay. Now you look at the sunnah, okay, of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's analyze this particular hadith. So this hadith is saying that the whole purpose of this hadith is that the Prophet wants the women to give charity. Tasaddaqna. He wants them to give charity on the day of Eid, but he begins by trying to say, you know, you will be the most of the inhabitants of the fire of hell. Right, so the question is like, well, why would the Prophet, first of all, as a tiny question, why would the Prophet on such a joyous occasion bring up something like this? Like, it's a joyous occasion, it's Eid, let's say, and the Prophet begins by trying to say to the women, do you know, most of you are going to end up in hell. And the interesting thing is he's addressing them. Okay. Now, let's take a look at some of the things that are mentioned in this text that are contradictory. Ittirab, what the muhaddithin call turbulence in what's being transmitted. The turbulence, first of all, begins with when did this take place? Now you may say, well, what's so interesting about that, Mufti? Well, it is interesting. In some narrations, like Abu Hurairah, it mentions this was just a khutbah. This was just a khutbah to people in general. In most narrations, it mentions the wording, it was Adha or Fitr, either one of the two Eids. Either Adha, big Eid, if we can call it big Eid, Eid al-Adha, or Eid al-Fitr. Now you think, well, you know, what's the big deal? You can mix up an Eid. You know, Eid, Alhamdulillah. Aha. But there's a big problem here. A little, like something to focus in on. You see, Eid al-Fitr had began since like maybe the second year of Hijri coming up. Every year Muslims were celebrating Eid al-Fitr after Ramadan. Eid al-Adha, the Prophet only celebrated once after the Hajj. His final khutbah of farewell, his sermon where he bid people kind of farewell. That was such a phenomenal event that took place outside at the end of Hajj, not in Medina, at the end of Hajj. For the companion to be mixing these two up is not like a small event. It's not like for us. Like I think back and I think, was it, which Eid was it? You know, both Eids. Was it this Eid or that Eid? No, because Eid al-Adha with the Prophet occurred once and it was a spectacular. It was a huge event. It wasn't just something like, oh, like an Eid in Medina that they were having all the time. This was a huge, spectacular event. And the person narrating keeps saying, I can't even remember which one it was. So some turbulence. Let's move on. More turbulence. Where does the Prophet address the women? In some of these narrations, it says, like Abu Hurairah says, that the Prophet just addressed people there. He addressed men and women, but only speaking to the women. In the other narrations, like you will see Ibn Mas'ud, you will see Abu Sa'id al-Khudri's, the Prophet walked off and he went to the women area where women were gathered. And there he addressed them. Now the question here comes, if he addressed the women over there, these male companions weren't there. So who's telling them that he said this? It has to have been one of the women, because they didn't follow the Prophet around. And what's interesting is there is a narration that Bilal, actually the Prophet in one narration leaned in on Bilal and he asked the women to give charity, and that has no mention of any of this kind of stuff in it. It's just the Prophet encouraging them to give charity. So, okay, so now the location, like as in the actual, the Prophet going to where the women were seated and addressing them privately. But then none of these male companions like Abu Hurairah or Abu Sa'id al-Khudri were actually there. So they're hearing this from somebody who we don't know who that somebody is. So this is, and how do we know whether that somebody misinterpreted, okay, or misrelayed something? So that's one point. The other point is, and this is a very important point now, as Ibn al-Jawzi and other scholars said, if you find a hadith that has contradictions in it, factual errors or linguistic errors, know that this is fabricated. Now, take a look at this hadith. This hadith actually contains factual errors. Right, so take a look at this. In this hadith, the Prophet says to the women, you will be the majority of the inhabitants of the hellfire. So they ask the Prophet, Bima, why? And in several narrations he says, li, because. And in others he answers. In all of them pretty much he answers by giving the justification. So he's answering their question, why are we the greater inhabitants of the hellfire? I've already read the hadith. Somebody's asking, can we hear the hadith? I've already read it. So they say in several of these narrations, so for example, they will say, Bima, he says, فَإِنِّي رَأَيْتُكُنَّ أَكْثَرَ أَهْلِ النَّارِ, I've seen you as the majority inhabitants of the hellfire. They say, why is that? And in some narrations, so you will see that in Tirmidhi, لِكَثْرَةِ لَعْنِكُنَّ, because of your excessive swearing. وَكُفْرِكُنَّ الْعَشِيرِ. Okay, or in all the other narrations in Bukhari, in Muslim, تُكْثِرْنَ اللَّعْنِ, because you excessively swear. وَتَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرِ, and you are ungrateful to your husband or your provider. Now, and this is the same theme in all of them. Now the question here is, that's actually a factual error. That's actually a factual error. I want us to pause here. Because right throughout, cross-culturally, throughout history, till to our modern age, men, by and large, outperform women in swearing. Men have always sworn much more than women, and they continue to do so. In fact, and this is cross-cultural, that people, it's not ladylike to use bad language. Even in this modern age, I mean, you could say, well, women today swear. They do swear. Women have always sworn as well. But it is unquestionable in any culture that men always outperform women in swearing. Right? So this is one important point, that this is actually a factual error. That they tukthirna al-la'n, because you swear excessively. But that's not true. That men swear much more than women do. And if you're going to be honest, swearing per se is not haram. La'na, cursing per se, is not haram. I mean, there may be a difference of opinion, but generally cursing is not haram. It is swearing at people that is haram. So when you say to people, you know, you so-and-so, that causes harm and abuse, and that is haram. Just cursing is not haram per se, because even in the hadith, several hadith, the Prophet will say, La'an Allah, may Allah curse so-and-so, may Allah curse so-and-so. The companions all the time used curses in the hadith. You read the curse, may your mother be bereft of you, may you become an orphan, may you get a disease. These were the kind of curses in many of the swears, in many of the hadith of the companions and stuff like this. So then one could argue that most of the wars throughout human history have been caused by men. That is unquestionable. Now you could say women have played a role in that, but generally it is always men. Now, is killing not worse than swearing? Is killing not? Yet Allah described, the Quran describes murder as the highest of crimes. And yet the majority of the inhabitants of the hellfire are therefore swearing, which, by the way, they don't outdo their counterparts in. So that's right. So that is a contradiction. So it is not true that the women of Arabia swore more than men. That is not true. Women cross-culturally. You can check out sociological studies. Women do not, they do swear, but men outperform women in swearing cross-culturally, generally across the board. So that is a factual error in that hadith. Hence Qadi Iyad and all these scholars had to ignore this, because they even felt, well, because they even said that otherwise in our day and age men always swear more than women. And he said, well, maybe the Prophet was speaking about a specific women, because otherwise men always swear more than women. So, you know, scholars had already highlighted this. The other thing is takfurna al-ashir, that you are ungrateful to your husband. Now, let's be honest. Everybody is ungrateful. Men and women are ungrateful. Allah says in the Quran that innal insana ladhalumun kaffar, that insan is indeed excessively ungrateful. Right? So somebody said here, this is not about swearing, this is about cursing. Cursing is swearing. There is no difference really. I know people, religious people tend to think there's a difference, but some religious people, but there isn't. It's just that over time, curses turned from kind of plagues, diseases, to sexual kind of swears. And this is more in the latter centuries. It really is based on taboos. Whatever is the taboo of a generation, that's what becomes the swear. So cursing is really swearing. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was talking about cursing, he was talking about this, like, God damn you, God damn you, God damn you. God damn you was their version of swearing. And the swears in the past were not sexual, because sex was not really a taboo in the past. It actually, ironically, became more of a taboo with the Victorian age. So in the past, disease, famine, all of these things were a taboo. So people would wish them on each other as a curse to kind of harm each other. But not as an actual, it's not that they said, you know, oh, like I'm praying to God, may God. that kind of stuff happens as well, but this was just la'an. Right, so that's the first error, and the second error is about being ungrateful, and men and women are equal in being ungrateful. The next issue, the contradiction, is the Prophet says, oh, allegedly, by the way, one of the narrations you see in Ibn Hibban, I believe it's in Ibn Hibban, where Ibn Mas'ud, actually, he's the one who says naqisatu aql, that women lack intellect, and not the Prophet. So there's some narratorial variations as well. Now, in these hadith, allegedly the Prophet is saying women, they lack intellect, yet they can easily distract a very determined man. Okay, so one question is, do they distract them just by being clever, or is this? But people might say, oh well, this is their beauty. Okay, so their beauty just distracts a man, no matter how resolute a man is. But then, how does that tie in with them actually lacking intellect? But let's go on. Let's not stop there. They ask the Prophet in this hadith that what is it that we lack intellect with, and what is it that we lack our faith in? So the Prophet allegedly answers them. He says that alaysa shahadatu ihdakun, isn't the testimony of one of you equal to half of that of a man? And they say yes. He says, well, that's your intellect. And in another hadith, and in the other part, he says, do you not refrain from praying when you're menstruating? And say yes. They say, well, that's the lack of your faith. Well, the irony here is that these rules have come to them from the religion. So that's absurd. Like the religion, on one hand, when you look in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet says, oh, the menstruation is something, it's innama dhaka shay'un katabahu Allahu ala banati Adam. You know, this is something that Allah has, it's a law of nature that Allah has set for females. It's nothing, like he tells them in a way that this is nothing to kind of think bad about menstruation. So if this is something natural, how can the religion be kind of like, well, kind of period shaming them for it? Like it's saying on one hand, you see, because that's a contradiction. Like I can't say to, like if I say to you, like imagine I've got a group of people and I say, okay, well, we're going to go out now, and I tell you what, you stay here, and I select one of them to stay here, and he says, okay. And then I say, oh, well, didn't you stay here? Well, that just shows that you're dumb. And the person will say, well, but you told me to stay here. So on one hand, we're saying that Allah and His Messenger are saying, oh, you're not allowed to, don't pray or don't fast. This is a dispensation for you. It's like, you get this off. Take it as a token of charity. So they say, all right, thanks, much appreciated. And then you say, ha, 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 well, now you lack faith. Well, then just tell them to pray then. They would just pray if you told them to pray. Like you can't, you see, that's an absurd kind of equation. You can't do something like that. I can't say, well, don't do this, and now that I told you to don't do it, you refrain, and then I kind of shame you for it. Ha 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 ha. You know, like, you're so incapable, you don't even do that. Well, I don't do that because you asked me not to do it. So once again, another mockery, which is ridiculing the religion. And this is ridiculing Allah. The other thing is that, look, let's take a look at this. These hadith are, the message of these hadith are that women, they lack intellect to, and they lack faith to be able to perform these extra prayers. Let's just for a moment, just ride with that hypothetically. Let's just ride with that for a moment. That they lack faith for, because they don't pray whilst they're on their menstruation. If somebody lacked faith, let's take any other example. Let's say, and this is a poor analogy, but I'm just giving you an example. Let's say you're going to say somebody going through a difficult time, like there could be a traveller or an ill person or somebody underage or somebody elderly. Within the Sharia, whenever they lack something, or let's say they're ill, there will be a dispensation for them and there will be an extra reward. And you ought to say to somebody that lacks the ability that, you know what, because you don't have the ability, there's an extra safeguarding for you from the punishment, because you lack the capability. So this is how it ought to be. I'm just saying that if somebody was lacking an ability, you ought to kind of say, well, you know, for you there's extenuated circumstances. You're not going to get punishment because you are lacking. Rather than saying, because you have an inability, we're going to double punish you. Which goes against the Quran. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That Allah does not do taklif. So this is another irony. So you see, look, this hadith is full. These hadith are full of contradictions. They clash with the Quran. They clash with the Sunnah. They clash with the principles of Islam. They have turbulence in them. Now, they seem to mention factual errors like women swearing and cursing always excessively, which is not cross-culturally. Is actually, they underperform against their male counterparts. Ingratitude, which is non-gender specific. And they miss out actual crimes like murder, warfare, all these things, genocide, which are usually always caused by men. And it seems to pick up as on these tiny things. So it is impossible. This is a false misattribution to the Messenger of Allah. This is actually an insult to Allah, to His Messenger, to Islam. This is an insult to attribute these hadith to the Messenger of Allah. So anybody that's asking, look, whenever you look at the validity of a hadith, it has to measure up against the principles of Islam. Now, when we take a look at these chains, by the way, I will quite, with some speed, go through some of these just to highlight some of these issues. So in Bukhari, this chain comes through Sa'id ibn Abi Maryam, through Muhammad ibn Ja'far, through Zayd ibn Aslam, through Iyad ibn Abdullah, from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Now, you will see in this chain, right, first of all, there's already one issue I just want to highlight, because this is Bukhari. I'll just kind of highlight this, give a bit of emphasis. Why is it that here it doesn't mention Haddathana? That Sa'id ibn Abi Maryam is saying, I heard. Although in some narrations, he says I heard, but without a complete hadith from this teacher of his, from Muhammad ibn Ja'far. Here he says akhbarana, which is a term used loosely when you may have read it from a book. So that's one layer of uncertainty. Al-Dhahabi says about Sa'id ibn Abi Maryam that in his hadith you find gharaib, you find strange things transmitted. Although Dhahabi tries to justify it by saying maybe he's got so much encyclopedic knowledge, but still that's a problem. You know, I find that as a huge kind of problem. And you see another issue here, Zayd ibn Aslam. Now, he's generally a reliable scholar. Nobody's doubting that. He's the son of Aslam, who was the freed slave of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an. But the interesting thing is he has on some occasions done tadlis. And at least one occasion he's known to have done tadlis from Ibn Umar. That's been highlighted by Ibn Abdul Bar. It's been picked up by Ibn Hajar. And people may say, well, he only did it as a one-off. But still, here he's doing anana. That's problematic. The next narrator is Iyad ibn Abdullah. Now this Iyad ibn Abdullah is mutashabih, because they're trying to say there's a companion known as Abdullah ibn Sa'ad ibn Sarah, the one who the Prophet spared on the conquest of Mecca because he was related to Uthman, and Uthman, he was like a foster brother. They're trying to say this is his son. But the interesting thing is there is exactly another Iyad ibn Abdullah who transmits from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who also Zayd ibn Aslam transmits from. He's also known as Iyad ibn Abi Zuhair, and he has huge problems. You know, people like Ali ibn al-Madini says he's unknown. Ibn Hajar even speaks about that Iyad ibn Hilal as is he Iyad ibn Abi Zuhair, is he Iyad ibn Abdullah. There's all this confusion about him. People may say, look, this isn't confusing for them. They want this to believe that this is Iyad ibn Abdullah ibn Sa'ad. But they don't mention that. And this is not the first time that these muhaddithin do this. Imam Bukhari, for his own teacher, al-Dhuhli, Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli, he blags his name on several occasions just so to confuse it with other names, because he knows people will find problems with him. And he's done it with at least one or two other rawis as well. This is not me. Dhahabi says this, that does he transmit from his teacher who's blacklisted. He says he does it in over 30 occasions by doing tadlis, by using his grandfather's name. So because he's got other teachers by that name, so you get confused. So to me, this chain, it's problematic. You see, the other chain in Bukhari is exactly the same. Iyad ibn Abdullah, you've got Iyad ibn Abdullah once again, who's a problem. In Sahih Muslim, we've got Muhammad ibn Rumah, the Egyptian, who says, I heard Akhbarana Layth from Ibn al-Had, from Abdullah ibn Dinar, from Abdullah ibn Umar, from the Messenger of Allah. Now, the question here is Muhammad ibn Rumah, he's somebody who Bukhari left out as a narrator. And the question is why? Because he's somebody Abu Dawood said, even though Abu Dawood said, look, I'm going to respect him as trustworthy, but he said, I never took a single hadith from him. And here he doesn't even say, I heard. He says, Akhbarana. That's interesting. The other thing is Layth ibn Sa'ad, although Layth ibn Sa'ad is an amazing scholar, contemporary of Imam Malik, but we know about him, he used to take several hadith just in books. Munawala. And here he doesn't say I heard, he says an Ibn al-Had, right? So, and Abdullah ibn Dinar, right? So Abdullah ibn Dinar, who's hearing from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, al-Uqayli mentions him in the Du'afa. He mentions him from the weak transmitters, and he says that his hadith have ittirab, turbulence in them. The Tirmidhi narration has somebody called Huraym ibn Mis'ar, who, okay, Ibn Hajar says is barely acceptable, who's heard from Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad al-Darawardi. Abu Zur'a says about him, Sayyi'ul Hifth. He had a pathetic memory, right? Rubbama yukhti, he would make mistakes. Nasa'i says he's not reliable. Who hears from Suhail, who takes an Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. Uqayl says about him from Yahya ibn Ma'in, Laysa bil Qawi, is not reliable. Abu Hatim says we do not use him as evidence. Ibn Hibban says he makes mistakes. Okay. Next, Abu Dawood. Abu Dawood transmits he's got the same Abdullah ibn Dinar in the chain. He's got Abu Tahir. Right, Abu Tahir, who's known as Ahmad ibn Amr. Although Abu Hatim says he's okay, but yet Ibn Qudayd said about him that he did not used to memorize. And then the rest of the chain is the same. Let me just see. Right. We've got a chain in Ibn Khuzaymah, which comes from, it's got Muhammad ibn Yahya and Zakaria ibn Yahya ibn Ibban, who hear from Ibn Abi Maryam, same problem again. From Muhammad ibn Ja'far, who hear from Zayd ibn Aslam, same problem again. From Iyad, same problem again. Okay, Abu Tahir, the next narration, same problem, I've just highlighted it already. Who hears from Abu Bakr, who hears from Ahmad ibn Abda, from Abdul Aziz al-Darawardi, same problem again. He was problematic, as Abu Zur'a and others have said. Who hears from Suhail, same problem again. Ibn Hibban brings a narration from Fadl ibn Hubab, who Darqutni says that his hadith, some of his hadith had mistakes in there. Ibn Hajar even highlights that in 1-2 narrations about him making a mistake. Who transmits this from Bundar, who transmits this from Gundar, and even Bundar, Muhammad ibn Bashar al-Fallas actually called him a liar. I'm not saying that, but somebody's already highlighted it. And some people had problematized his narration. So who's taking from Gundar, who some people had said is al-Dhahabi had... My little devil has come in. Right, okay. Ek minute. Papa. Okay. Ek minute. So, point of mentioning this goes on. The chain got a bit distracted there. This from Ibn Mas'ud is transmitted from Wa'il ibn Mahana, who transmits no other hadith ever except this one. Now tell me, is that a problem or what? People may say no, but to me, it is a problem. Of course that's a problem. He's never known to transmit anything else. The other hadith of Ibn Hibban is from Hassan ibn Sufyan, from Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli, once again Ibn Abi Maryam, Muhammad ibn Ja'far, Ibn Abi Kathir, Zayd ibn Aslam, Iyad, same problem again, people. Ibn Majah's narration, Muhammad ibn Rumah, same problem again. Layth ibn Sa'ad an, same problem again. And Ibn al-Had from Ibn Abdullah ibn Dinar, same problem again. So look, all of these people have some problems. The reason I'm highlighting this is to show that, look, when these narrations already have, they have problems in the chain. These are not unquestionably sound. And anybody that's going to critique what I'm going to say, tell them to bring an unquestionably, like a bulletproof isnad. Because what they're trying to do is override the Quran. They're trying to throw the reputation of the Prophet under the bus. They're trying to insult Islam. At least let them bring something conclusive, rather than these chains which all have some ilal. They all have some problems that show that this is unacceptable, especially since it goes against the Quran to start off with. It goes against the principles. It's full of contradictions in it, right? And it is something that has led to the ridicule of Islam. I think we've kind of gone on quite a bit. It's past midnight. Call it a day, inshallah. So why were women not given prophethood? I do believe women were prophets, as Ibn Hazm has highlighted and argued for as well. Acha chalo ek minute. See, my little devil's gonna be disrupting this whole thing anyway. Chalo ya aja. Take it. Aja aja. Aja aja. Right, so just sitting there, about to cause destruction, not even be awake. Chalo ya ya. Anyway, right, so people, if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe to my channel. I'm always putting updates there. I'm going to put these kind of some of these kind of cutout segments. They're already on there. I've put on there about the hitting verse recently. So these segments about the hitting verse explained, I've just put that up recently. Check it out. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on Facebook, reach out to me if you haven't done so before. Like my page. Right, so, and Snapchat as well, Mount 2014. Other than that, people, take, inshallah. Okay. Look at this. See, getting bossed around by a new four-year-old. Okay. Right, guys, I'm going to leave you to it. Which women do you believe were prophets? I believe amongst them was Maryam, alayhi salam. But I do believe there were women prophets as well, and Ibn Hazm has a detailed argument on that, and I believe Sheikh Akram Nadwi may have written something on that as well. But other than that, folks, inshallah, chalo, yan lao. Oh, there goes my tools and gadgets are about to be broken. Okay, well, she's clocked it. Okay, yeah. Okay, T. Right, guys, I'm going to leave you to it. Have an awesome evening, awesome night, wherever you are. Take very good care of yourselves. We'll catch up, inshallah, next week. I hope this has been of some benefit. Like, share, spread the love, people. Spread the peace and this message of Islam as it ought to be, one of compassion and tolerance. Inshallah, take very good care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.